I flew 13 hours from Tokyo to surprise my mother, paying off her entire $60,000 mortgage as a gift. Instead of a hug, she called private security, claiming I was trespassing. She thought she'd won, but she forgot I controlled the paperwork. This is where the story truly begins, and you won't want to miss what happens. Make sure you're subscribed to see it through to the end. We're always curious. Where in the world are you all watching from today? Let us know in the comments. The air in the cabin of the 787 was stale, recycled, and dry, clinging to the back of my throat like dust. I had been awake for nearly 20 hours, my body suspended somewhere over the Pacific Ocean, vibrating with a mixture of caffeine and nervous adrenaline. I looked down at the envelope resting on my tray table for the 100th time. Inside was a single sheet of heavy, cream-colored paper, the confirmation of mortgage satisfaction. It had taken me 3 years of aggressive saving, living in a shoebox apartment in Tokyo, and taking on every overtime logistics contract my firm offered, but I had done it. My mother, Constance, was finally free. At 60, she would never have to worry about a bank taking her home again. The flight attendant announced our descent into San Francisco, and a smile tugged at the corners of my tired mouth. I hadn't told her I was coming. I hadn't told her about the money, either. I wanted to see her face when I handed her the deed, fully paid off. I wanted to see the weight lift from her shoulders, the same weight that had been crushing her since Dad died 5 years ago. By the time the Uber pulled up to the curb of the house I grew up in, the autumn sun was already setting, casting long, bruised shadows across the lawn. I dragged my suitcase out of the trunk, the wheels clattering loudly on the pavement. I tipped the driver, took a deep breath of the crisp California air, and walked up the driveway. Something felt off. The rose bushes my father had planted along the walkway were gone, replaced by stark, modern succulents in jagged white stones. The warm, inviting beige of the siding had been painted a cold, clinical slate gray. It looked like a house from a magazine, not a home. I shook off the unease. She's just updating things, I told myself. That's good, she's moving forward. I reached into my purse and pulled out my key, the brass key with the faded red rubber cap I'd kept on my ring since high school. I slid it into the lock and turned. It didn't budge. I frowned, jiggling it. Nothing. I pulled it out, checked the teeth, and tried again, pushing harder this time. The lock was solid, unyielding. It was new. Confusion started to curdle into panic in my stomach. Had she broken the lock? Was she okay? I raised my hand and knocked firmly on the wood. Mom, it's me, it's Isabella. I waited, silence. Then I heard heavy footsteps, not the soft shuffle of my mother's slippers, but the hard, confident strike of dress shoes on hardwood. The door swung open. Standing there wasn't my mother. It was Rick. He was wearing a crisp linen shirt unbuttoned one too many at the top, his silver hair gelled back aggressively. He held a glass of red wine loosely in one hand, leaning against the doorframe as if he were guarding a fortress. "Isabella," he said, his voice smooth but lacking any warmth. He didn't step back to let me in. "We weren't expecting you." "Rick," I said, trying to look past him into the foyer. "My key didn't work. Is Mom here? I flew in to surprise her." "Surprise?" he deadpanned, taking a sip of his wine. "Yes, you certainly are full of those. Constance isn't up for visitors right now." "Visitors?" I laughed, a sharp, incredulous sound. "I'm her daughter, I live here. Well, this is my home base. Please move aside." I tried to step forward to push past him, but he shifted his weight, effectively blocking the entrance with his shoulder. "Not anymore," he said. "Rick, who is it?" My mother's voice drifted from the kitchen. A moment later, she appeared in the hallway. She looked different. Her soft, graying curls were dyed a harsh blonde, and she was wearing a dress that looked far too expensive for a Tuesday night at home. "Mom." I waved, relief washing over me. "It's me. I came too." She stopped next to Rick, her expression unreadable. She didn't smile. She didn't rush forward to hug me. She looked at me like I was a solicitor trying to sell her solar panels. "Isabella," she said, her voice tight. "You shouldn't have come." "What?" I dropped my hand. "Mom, I flew 13 hours. I have incredible news. I paid off the—" "Rick," she interrupted, looking up at him, her eyes wide and fearful. She's going to make a scene. I told you she would act like this. It's ruining the evening. Mom, what are you talking about? I felt the blood drain from my face. I just want to come in. I'm exhausted. Rick set his wine glass down on the entry table and pulled a small remote from his pocket. I tried to be polite, Isabella, but Constance has been very clear. She doesn't want your toxicity in this house during our transition. You need to leave the property. Now. Transition, toxicity. I was trembling now, not from cold, but from a sudden, violent shock. I have no idea what you're talking about. Mom, please tell him to stop. My mother looked at me, her eyes hardening. Go back to Tokyo, Isabella. You have your life, let us have ours. We don't need you hovering over us. I'm not hovering, I'm helping. I shouted, the desperation rising. I just paid $60,000 to the bank for you, today. Rick laughed. It was a dry, dismissive sound. Money isn't love, sweetheart, and we don't need your charity. We have plans, big plans. He pressed a button on the remote. I've alerted the community patrol. They'll be here in 2 minutes to escort you off the premises. You called security on me. I whispered, looking at my mother. Mom, you're letting him throw me out. She turned away, refusing to meet my gaze. Goodbye, Isabella. Rick slammed the door in my face. The sound echoed like a gunshot, vibrating through the wood and straight into my chest. I stood there, staring at the closed door, the envelope with the mortgage discharge still clutched in my freezing hand. The betrayal was worse than the diagnosis itself. It was an amputation of my entire history, severed in seconds. The silence following the slam of the door was absolute. For a moment, the only sound was the rushing of blood in my ears, loud and chaotic like the ocean during a storm. I stood paralyzed on the welcome mat, a mat that said welcome to our happy place in loopy cursive script that I didn't recognize. My hand was still raised, hovering as if to knock again, but my limbs felt heavy, leaden. I couldn't breathe. The rejection was physical. It felt like a punch to the gut that left me gasping for air on the porch where I used to sit and do my homework. Then, the flashing yellow lights swept across the lawn. The community security patrol car, a white SUV with bold green lettering, pulled up to the curb behind the Uber that had long since departed. A man in a uniform stepped out. He wasn't a police officer, but he carried himself with an officious, grim authority. Miss, he called out, walking up the driveway, his hand resting on his belt. We received a call about a trespasser causing a disturbance. I'm not a trespasser, I managed to choke out, my voice cracking. Tears were finally starting to sting my eyes, hot and humiliating. I'm her daughter. I grew up here. The guard stopped at the bottom of the porch steps. He looked sympathetic but firm. I understand that, ma'am, but Mr. Henderson and Mrs. Miller have explicitly requested you be removed from the property. They said you're becoming aggressive. Aggressive? I laughed, a hysterical bubble of sound escaping my throat. I'm holding a suitcase and a mortgage deed. I just wanted to give her a gift. You need to step off the property, ma'am, or I'll have to call the sheriff's department. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. I looked back at the house. The blinds in the living room window twitched. I knew Rick was watching. He was probably sipping that wine, enjoying the show. My mother was likely in the kitchen, pretending none of this was happening, just as she always did when things got difficult. Fine, I whispered. I'm going. I grabbed the handle of my suitcase and dragged it down the driveway, the wheels hitting every crack in the concrete with a jarring thud. I walked past the guard, keeping my head down to hide the tears streaming down my face. I could feel the eyes of the neighbors burning into my back. Mrs. Higgins across the street was definitely watching from behind her curtains. The shame was a hot cloak wrapped around my shoulders. I walked 3 blocks until I was out of sight of the house, my suitcase feeling heavier with every step. I sat down on a public bench near the community park, shivering in the cooling evening air. I pulled out my phone. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely unlock the screen. I needed a place to sleep. I opened a hotel booking app and found the nearest decent place, a generic business hotel near the highway. I booked it without looking at the price. Then I opened my banking app. There it was, the transaction history. $60,432. $11 wire transfer sent. It was gone. My life savings. The emergency fund I had built up over a decade. The money I had earmarked for a down payment on my own apartment one day, which I had sacrificed because I thought my mother's security was more important. I stared at the zero balance in my savings account. A wave of nausea rolled over me. I leaned forward, putting my head between my knees, trying not to be sick on the sidewalk. Ding. A text message notification lit up the screen. It was from Mom. My heart leaped. Maybe she had come to her senses. Maybe she had realized Rick was crazy. Maybe she was sorry. I opened the message. Isabella, please do not come back. Rick and I are starting a new chapter. We are selling the house next month and traveling. The sale is already pending. We don't need your complications. Please respect our privacy. Mom. I read it twice, then a third time. Selling the house I had just paid for. The house that was the only thing my father had left us. The sheer audacity of it cut through the grief and replaced it with something colder, sharper. She wasn't just rejecting me, she was erasing me. She was taking my sacrifice, my hard-earned money, and using it to fund a permanent vacation with a man she had known for 6 months. I sat up straight on the bench, wiping the tears from my cheeks with the back of my hand. The cool night air felt different now. It wasn't chilling. It was clarifying. I looked at the envelope still clutched in my left hand. The satisfaction of mortgage. Rick thought he was smart. He thought he had isolated a lonely, emotional daughter who would run back to Japan with her tail between her legs. He thought he was dealing with a child. But he had forgotten who I was. I wasn't just a daughter. I was the director of international logistics for a global shipping firm. My entire career was built on tracking assets, managing complex contracts, and ensuring that nothing moved without my authorization. He thought the house was theirs to sell because the bank was paid off. But they had forgotten one crucial thing, I whispered to the empty street. I looked down at the document again. Because I had paid the bank directly from my account as a third-party payer, the bank had mailed the official, notarized discharge of mortgage document to me, the payer, not to the homeowner. They didn't have the deed. I did. And without this piece of paper and the lien release I was currently holding, they couldn't close a sale with anyone. To understand why this betrayal felt like a physical amputation, you have to understand the house. It wasn't just wood and stucco. It was the physical embodiment of my father's love. My dad, Thomas, was a contractor. He built that house with his own hands. I have memories of being 5 years old, sitting in the sawdust, handing him nails while he framed the living room. Every beam, every tile, every uneven patch of drywall in the garage had his fingerprints on it. When he died of a sudden heart attack 5 years ago, my mother fell apart. Constance was a woman who had never balanced a checkbook in her life. Dad had handled everything, the bills, the investments, the maintenance. Without him, she was a ship without a rudder, spinning in circles. I stepped in. I was 27 then, just starting my career in Tokyo. I took over the finances remotely. I paid the property taxes. I hired the gardeners. I flew back 3 times a year to check on her. I became the parent and she became the child. I didn't mind. I loved her. She was my mom. She was soft and kind, and she smelled like lavender and old books. She needed me, or so I thought. 6 months ago, everything changed. I was on a video call with her when she mentioned she had met someone at the country club, a guest of a friend. His name is Rick, she had said, giggling like a teenager. He's a retired entrepreneur. He was in tech or maybe real estate. He's very wealthy, Isabella. He knows everything about investing. At first, I was happy for her. She deserved companionship. But then the calls got shorter. She started missing our Sunday check-ins. When we did talk, she sounded distant, repeating phrases that didn't sound like her. She started using words like asset liquidation and opportunity cost. Rick says I'm sitting on a gold mine with this house, she told me 3 months ago. He says it's foolish to let equity stagnate. Mom, it's your home, I had argued. It's Dad's house. Rick says we shouldn't be sentimental about bricks, she replied crisply. That was the first red flag. But I was 4,000 miles away, burying myself in work, trying to make enough money to pay off the remaining mortgage so she would never be pressured to sell by a bank. I thought if I removed the debt, Rick's arguments about freeing up capital would vanish. I was naive. Sitting in the sterile hotel room, the hum of the mini fridge the only company I had, I pulled up the dossier I had started compiling on Rick the moment I met him at the door. I hadn't liked the way he looked at me, like I was an obstacle to be removed, not a person. I searched his name online. Richard Rick Vane. His LinkedIn profile was a masterclass in vagueness. Visionary investor. Global consultant. There were no specific company names, no dates of employment, just a lot of buzzwords and photos of him on sailboats and golf courses. I dug deeper. I used a background check service I sometimes used for vetting new shipping partners. The results began to populate on my laptop screen, and my stomach tightened. Richard Vane, also known as Richard Van Houten, also known as Rick Vance. He had a pattern, 3 marriages in the last 12 years, all to women over 50, all to widows or divorcees with substantial assets but little financial literacy. There were civil lawsuits in Florida and Arizona. Breach of contract. Unjust enrichment. One forum post from 4 years ago caught my eye. A woman named Barbara had written, "He promised we would travel the world. He convinced me to sell my condo and put the money into a joint travel fund. Once the check cleared, he disappeared. He left me with nothing." I looked at the text message from my mother again. "We are selling the house next month and traveling." It wasn't a relationship. It was a harvest. Rick didn't love my mother. He was farming her. He had identified a vulnerable target, a widow with a paid-off asset worth nearly $2 million in the current California market, and he had systematically isolated her from the only person who would protect her, me. The surprise from the title wasn't just that they were selling. It was that they were selling immediately. I realized then why Rick had been so aggressive at the door, why he hadn't let me in, why he had called security so quickly. They were probably packing. They were staging the house. They needed me gone because I was the only variable he couldn't control. He had turned my mother against me to clear the path to the money. I looked at the mortgage satisfaction document again. I ran my thumb over the embossed seal of the bank. Rick wanted a quick sale. He wanted the cash. He wanted to liquidate the asset and move the funds into an account he could access before anyone asked too many questions. I stood up and walked to the hotel window, looking out at the highway traffic below. The tears had stopped completely. The sadness was gone, replaced by the cold, hard precision that made me excellent at my job. I picked up my phone. I didn't call my mother. I didn't call Rick. I dialed the number for a lawyer I had gone to college with, a shark of a litigator named Sarah who specialized in estate law and fraud. It was 10:00 p.m., but she answered on the second ring. "Isabella," she asked, sounding surprised. "I thought you were in Tokyo. Is everything okay?" "No," I said, my voice steady and dark. "I'm in California. I need to file an emergency injunction, and I need to do it first thing tomorrow morning. I'm going to freeze an asset." "What asset?" Sarah asked. "My mother's house," I said, "and after that I'm going to hunt a predator." The morning sun didn't feel warm. It felt like a spotlight, exposing every flaw in my hurried plan. I sat in the corner booth of a diner 3 blocks from Sarah's office, the smell of burnt coffee and sizzling bacon doing nothing to settle my stomach. My laptop was open, a chaotic spread of documents, emails, and bank statements glowing on the screen. Sarah slid into the booth opposite me, tossing a leather portfolio onto the table with a heavy thud. She looked exactly as I remembered from law school. Sharp, polished, and terrifyingly competent. "Okay," she said without preamble, pulling a file from her bag. "I've reviewed what you sent me at 2 a.m. It's messy, Isabella. Legally, the house is in your mother's name. You paid the mortgage, yes, but that's technically a gift unless you have a written agreement stating otherwise." "I have the satisfaction of mortgage document," I said, tapping the envelope. "The bank sent it to me." "That helps," Sarah conceded, pulling out a pen. "But it doesn't give you ownership. It just proves you paid a debt, however." She paused, a small, predatory smile touching her lips. "You mentioned something about a constructive trust in your email." "Yes," I said, leaning forward. My dad and mom always said the house was meant for me eventually. When dad died, mom was too grief-stricken to handle probate properly, so we just left everything as is. But I have emails, dozens of them over the last 5 years, where she explicitly states that my contributions are investments in my future inheritance, and that she's holding the house for us. Sarah's eyes lit up. Show me. I spun the laptop around. I had spent the entire night combing through 5 years of correspondence. There, in black and white, were the emails. March 12, 2021. Izzy, thank you for covering the property tax again. I know it's a lot, but think of it as investing in your own property. One day this will all be yours, debt-free. July 4, 2022. I'm so grateful you're handling the repairs, honey. You're taking such good care of your future home. Sarah read them silently, nodding slowly. This is gold, she whispered. This establishes intent. We can argue that your payments weren't gifts, but contributions made in reliance on a promise. We can file a lease pendens immediately. Oh, what? A lease pendens, she explained, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. It's a formal notice that there is a pending lawsuit concerning the title of the property. Once it's filed with the county recorder, it clouds the title. No title company will ensure a sale, and no buyer will touch the house until the lawsuit is resolved. It effectively freezes the asset. Do it, I said instantly. Freeze it today. I will, Sarah said, typing furiously on her phone. But Isabella, this is the nuclear option. Your mother is going to be furious. This stops the sale cold. Rick won't be able to get a dime out of that house. That's the point, I said, staring out the window. Rick doesn't want the house. He wants the money. If I cut off the money, I reveal the man. And what about the $60,000? Sarah asked gently. That's just the beginning, I said. I need you to find everything you can on Richard Vane. I want bank records, previous marriage licenses, divorce decrees. I want to know who he really is. I have a pie on retainer, Sarah said. His name is Mike. He's expensive, but he's thorough. I'll put him on it. We spent the next 2 hours drafting the complaint. Isabella versus Constance, complaint for constructive trust and unjust enrichment. Seeing my name versus my mother's on a legal document made my chest ache, but I forced myself to focus on the goal. I wasn't fighting her, I was fighting for her. By noon, the lease pendens was filed. By 1:00 p.m., Mike the Pie had sent over a preliminary report. It was worse than I thought. Richard Vane wasn't just a romance scammer, he was a ghost. The entrepreneur background was completely fabricated. The tech company he claimed to have sold in the 90s didn't exist. But what did exist was a trail of bankruptcy filings under 3 different variations of his name in Nevada, Florida, and Oregon. And there was something else. A marriage license from 4 years ago in Phoenix, Arizona, to a woman named Beatrice. And a death certificate for Beatrice only 14 months later. Cause of death, accidental fall. My blood ran cold. Sarah, I said, pointing at the screen, look at this. She leaned in, her face paling. Okay, this just went from civil dispute to protect your mother's life. I need to talk to her, I said, standing up. I need to show her this. You can't go there, Sarah warned. They have a restraining order pending, remember. If you step foot on that property, you'll be arrested. I won't go to the house, I said, my mind racing. But I know where she goes every Wednesday at 4:00 p.m. Hair appointment. Rick never goes with her because the fumes give him a headache. Isabella, Sarah started. I have to try, Sarah, I said, grabbing my bag. If I don't, I might lose her forever, or worse. The Salon Lumiere was a sanctuary of white marble and expensive shampoos. My mother had been going to Andre for 20 years. It was the one ritual she never broke. I sat in my rental car across the street, watching the entrance. At 3:55 p.m., Rick's silver Mercedes pulled up to the curb. My stomach tightened. He was driving her. He got out, opened her door, and kissed her on the cheek. It looked performative, too perfect. He didn't go in. He got back in the car and drove off. I waited 5 minutes, then walked into the salon. The receptionist looked up, startled. She knew me. Isabella, oh my God, honey, you look exhausted. We haven't seen you in ages. Hi, Maria, I said, forcing a smile. Is my mom in the back? She's just getting washed, Maria said, lowering her voice. She told us she's moving to Europe. Can you believe it? Yeah, wild, I muttered. I'm just going to surprise her. I walked back to the washing stations. My mother was leaning back in the chair, eyes closed, a towel wrapped around her head. Andre was massaging her scalp. Mom, I said softly. Her eyes snapped open. For a second, there was genuine joy, the instinctive reaction of a mother seeing her child. Then the mask slammed down. Fear, anger, Isabella. She sat up, water dripping down her neck. What are you doing here? Rick said. Rick isn't here, Mom, I said, keeping my voice calm but firm. I need 5 minutes, just 5 minutes, please. I can't, she whispered, looking around nervously. He gets so upset when I talk to you. He says you're trying to control me. I'm trying to save you, I said, pulling a manila folder from my bag. Mom, Rick isn't who he says he is. Stop it. She pushed my hand away. He told me you would do this. He said you would invent lies because you're jealous of my happiness. You want me to be a lonely widow forever so you can keep managing me. Jealous? I laughed, a harsh sound in the quiet salon. Mom, look at this. I opened the folder and slammed a photo onto the counter next to the shampoo bottles. It was a mugshot from Florida 10 years ago. Rick, looking younger but undeniably him. The charge, grand theft and fraud. My mother stared at the photo. Her face went pale, but she shook her head violently. That's not him. That's a lookalike. Technology can fake anything these days, Isabella. Rick told me about deepfakes. Deepfakes? I stared at her, incredulous. Mom, this is a police record, and look at this. I pulled out the marriage license for Beatrice. He was married 4 years ago. Did he tell you that? He said he was private about his past, she stammered, her voice trembling. He said his late wife died tragically. She died after she fell down the stairs 2 weeks after changing her will, I said brutally. Mom, please, listen to me. He is isolating you. He is rushing the house sale. Why the rush? Why next month? Why not wait? Because the market is crashing. She parroted, clearly repeating Rick's words. We have to liquidate now to secure our retirement in Portugal. There is no retirement in Portugal, Mom. I shouted, causing Andre to step back in alarm. He's going to take the money and disappear, just like he did to Barbara in Arizona, just like he did to the woman in Florida. Get out, my mother screamed, tears streaming down her face. She wasn't angry at me, she was terrified. Terrified that I might be right, terrified that her fairy tale was a lie. Leave me alone, you're ruining everything. I filed a lease pendens this morning, I said quietly. The screaming stopped. What? I sued you, Mom, I said, my voice breaking. Or rather, I sued for the house. You can't sell it. The title is frozen. No realtor will touch it. No buyer can close. Her mouth opened in shock. You blocked the sale. I had to, I said. I paid off that mortgage to keep you safe, not to fund a con artist. The house isn't going anywhere until Rick is gone. She stared at me with a look of pure betrayal. I have no daughter, she hissed. Rick was right, you are poison. She turned back to the sink, sobbing into her hands. Andre, get her out of here, please. I stood there for a moment, my heart shattering into a million pieces. I had played my trump card and she hated me for it. I love you, Mom, I whispered. I'll be waiting when you're ready to see the truth. I walked out of the salon, my legs shaking. I felt sick. I had just declared war on my own mother, but as I reached my car, my phone buzzed. It was an unknown number. Isabella. A man's voice, smooth, menacing. Rick, I said. You're a clever girl, he said, his tone devoid of the charm he used on my mother. Freezing the asset, that was unexpected. The game is over, Rick, I said. I know about Beatrice, I know about Florida. You know nothing, he sneered. And you have no idea who you're dealing with. You think a piece of paper scares me. Constance is in love with me. She'll sign whatever I put in front of her. We can work around a lease pendens. Private buyers exist. cash deals happen. Not with a fraud investigation open, I bluffed. Watch your back, Isabella, he said, his voice dropping to a growl. Accidents happen, just ask Beatrice. The line went dead. I stared at the phone, a cold chill running down my spine. He had just admitted it. He had just threatened me, and he was terrified. The trap had worked, he was rattled, and a rattled predator makes mistakes. Rick's threat wasn't idle, but it was a mistake. He had broken character. The smooth, retired tech investor wouldn't threaten a woman, a desperate criminal would. I drove straight to Sarah's office and played the recording for her. I had an app that automatically recorded unknown numbers, a habit from dealing with international shipping logistics where verbal contracts were common. That's a threat, Sarah said, her face grim. He all but confessed to killing his wife. We need to take this to the police. Not yet, I said. The police will say it's vague. Accidents happen isn't a confession. It's menace, but it's deniable. We need something concrete. We need to catch him in the act of fraud here with Mom. The next 3 days were a blur of sleepless nights and caffeine. The Lee's pendants had done its job. Sarah's contacts in the local real estate world confirmed that the sale of my mother's house had imploded. The buyers, a young couple, had walked away the moment the title search flagged the lawsuit. Rick was panicking. Mike, the pie, called me on Friday morning. Isabella, you were right. He's trying to bypass the traditional market. He's listed the house on a private, cash for homes forum on the dark web. He's asking for $1.2 million, way below market value, for a quick, no questions asked cash deal. Can you trace it? I already have, Mike said. But here's the kicker. He's not using your mother's bank account for the deposit. He's using an offshore account in the Caymans. The account is in the name of RV Holdings. Constance isn't on it. He's cutting her out completely, I breathed. He's going to sell the house for cash, wire it to the Caymans, and leave her homeless. Exactly, Mike said. And I found something else, Beatrice's daughter. She lives in Seattle. I tracked her down. She wants to talk to you. I spent an hour on the phone with Emily, Beatrice's daughter. Her story was a mirror image of mine. The whirlwind romance, the isolation, the sudden need to liquidate assets for a dream life abroad. He took everything, Emily sobbed. Mom sold the lake house. The money went into a joint account and then it just vanished. 2 days later, she fell down the stairs. The police ruled it accidental because there was no sign of struggle, but I know he pushed her. He was the only one home. Emily, I said, my voice steady, I'm going to stop him, but I need your help. Can you send me the old emails, the bank records, anything that shows his pattern? I'll send you everything, she said. Please, Isabella, don't let him do it again. Armed with Emily's documents, Mike's dark web findings, and the recording of his threat, I had enough. But I needed a venue. I needed to expose him where he couldn't run and where my mother couldn't look away. I knew exactly where to do it. Every year, the Saturday before Thanksgiving, my parents' neighborhood held a harvest block party. It was a massive potluck in the community center. My mother was the head of the planning committee. She never missed it. It was her moment to shine, to be the queen of the cul-de-sac. I knew Rick would be there. He loved an audience. He would be charming the neighbors, playing the role of the devoted fiancé, probably spinning a story about how difficult I was being. I called Sarah. Get the sheriff, I said. Meet me at the community center at 6:00 p.m. tomorrow. I'm going to crash a party. The day of the party, I felt a strange calm. I dressed in a sharp black suit, my boardroom armor. I printed every document, the offshore account details, the mugshots, the marriage licenses, the dark web listing, and Emily's affidavit. I drove to the community center. The parking lot was full. I could hear music and laughter drifting from the open doors. I walked in. The hall was decorated with pumpkins and cornstalks. Tables were laden with casseroles and pies. In the center of the room, holding court near the punch bowl, was Rick. He had his arm around my mother's waist. She looked frail, her smile brittle and forced. She was wearing the diamond necklace my father had given her for their 25th anniversary. Rick spotted me first. His smile faltered for a fraction of a second, then hardened into a sneer. He whispered something to my mother. She looked up, saw me, and her face crumpled in distress. He started walking toward me, leaving her side. He was going to try to intercept me, to quietly escort me out before I could cause a scene. "Isabella," he said, his voice loud enough for the nearby tables to hear. "I thought we made it clear. You're not welcome here. Please, don't embarrass your mother any further." The room went quiet. Neighbors turned to watch. Mrs. Higgins lowered her fork. "I'm not here to embarrass her, Rick," I said, my voice projecting clearly across the hall. "I'm here to save her from you." "Save her?" Rick laughed, shaking his head theatrically. "Folks, I apologize. Constance's daughter has been having some mental health struggles. She's become obsessed with our happiness." "Is that why you listed her house on a Cash for Homes site yesterday?" I asked, holding up the printout. "For $2 million, wiring the money to an account in the Cayman Islands that doesn't have her name on it." Rick's face went white. "That's a lie, that's a forgery." "Is it?" I took a step forward. "And is this a forgery too?" I held up the mugshot. Richard Vance, grand theft, and this, the marriage license to Beatrice, who died suspiciously 2 weeks after liquidating her assets. "Mom," I called out, looking past him to where she stood frozen by the punch bowl. "Look at him, look at his face." My mother was staring at Rick. She saw the panic in his eyes. She saw the way his hands were twitching. "Rick," she whispered, "what is she talking about?" "She's crazy, Connie." Rick shouted, his charm dissolving into aggression. "Don't listen to her. She's trying to ruin us. Security. Someone call security." "We didn't call security." A deep voice boomed from the door. "But we did call the sheriff." Sarah walked in, flanked by 2 uniformed deputies and a plainclothes detective. Rick froze. He looked at the back exit. He looked at me. He looked at the deputies. "Richard Vane," the detective said, stepping forward. "We have a warrant for your arrest regarding outstanding fraud charges in Arizona, and we'd like to ask you some questions about the death of Beatrice Vane." Rick didn't argue. He didn't protest his innocence. He ran. He shoved Mrs. Higgins aside, knocking a plate of deviled eggs into the air, and bolted for the kitchen door. "Get him!" the detective shouted. The deputies sprinted after him. The room erupted in chaos. Screams, gasps, the sound of a scuffle in the kitchen, the crash of pots and pans. Then, silence. 2 minutes later, the deputies marched Rick back into the hall. He was handcuffed, his nose bleeding, his expensive linen shirt torn. He wasn't the suave investor anymore. He was a cornered rat. He looked at my mother as they dragged him past. "You stupid old woman," he spat. "You were so easy." My mother gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. The cruelty of it, the raw hatred in his voice, finally shattered the spell. The deputies shoved him out the door. The sirens wailed in the distance. I stood alone in the center of the room, the papers still in my hand. The neighbors were staring at me with awe and horror. My mother walked slowly toward me. She looked small, broken. She stopped 3 feet away. "Isabella," she whispered, her voice trembling. I didn't know." "I know, Mom," I said, my own tears finally spilling over. "I know." She collapsed into my arms, sobbing uncontrollably in front of the entire neighborhood. I held her tight, feeling the familiar scent of lavender and the unfamiliar sharpness of her frail shoulder blades. "I'm sorry," she wept. "I'm so sorry." "It's okay," I whispered into her hair, looking at the door where Rick had vanished. "He's gone. The house is safe. We're safe." The aftermath of Rick's arrest at the Harvest Block party was immediate and brutal. The illusion he had so carefully constructed around my mother shattered in an instant, leaving her exposed and humiliated in front of the very people she had spent decades trying to impress. As the deputies hauled Rick away, his venomous parting words hung in the air like toxic smoke. "You stupid old woman. You were so easy." My mother didn't scream or faint. She just stood there, her hands trembling violently, staring at the spot where he had stood. The silence in the community center was deafening. Neighbors who had been whispering about my instability moments ago now looked at me with a mixture of awe and pity. Mrs. Higgins, usually the neighborhood gossip queen, was the first to approach. She gently took the plate of spilled deviled eggs from the floor and placed a hand on my mother's arm. "Constance," she said softly. "Let's get you home." But the climax wasn't just the arrest, it was what happened next. Rick had been meticulous. We discovered later that night, while sitting at my mother's kitchen table with Sarah and the detective, that he had already transferred $50,000 of my mother's savings into a cryptocurrency account that was virtually untraceable. He had also taken out 3 credit cards in her name and maxed them out on cash advances. My mother sat in silence as we went through the statements. Every transaction was a fresh blow. The trips she thought he was paying for, charged to her. The expensive dinners. Her cards, the diamond necklace she was wearing, a cubic zirconia fake billed to a jewelry store credit line opened in her name. I signed papers," she whispered, her voice hollow. "He said they were for travel insurance, for the house sale." "He had you sign power of attorney documents, Mom," I said gently, sliding a paper across the table. "He was 2 days away from draining your retirement accounts entirely." The detective looked up from his notes. "We found a burner phone in his car. It has texts to a contact in the Caymans. He was planning to leave the country on Tuesday. The house sale on the dark web was just a bonus. He was going to take whatever cash he could get from a quick flip and vanish." My mother put her head in her hands and wept. It wasn't the polite, quiet crying of a grieving widow. It was a raw, guttural sound of pure shame. She had been played. She had let a stranger into her home, her bed, and her bank account, and in the process, she had thrown away her only daughter. "I called security on you," she sobbed, looking up at me with red-rimmed eyes. "I let him lock you out. I told you to leave." "It's okay, Mom," I said, reaching across the table to take her hand. "He manipulated you. That's what predators do. They find the crack in the armor and pry it open." "But I should have known," she whispered. "I'm your mother. I should have protected you." "You were lonely," I said, "and he was good at his job." The next few days were a whirlwind of legal action. Sarah worked tirelessly to freeze the fraudulent accounts. We contacted the credit bureaus, filed police reports for identity theft, and formally rescinded the power of attorney. The lease pendens I had filed was the only thing that had saved the house. Because the title was frozen, Rick hadn't been able to finalize the quick cash sale on the dark web. The buyer, spooked by the legal cloud, had backed out. I stayed in the guest room, my old room. It felt strange to be back, sleeping in the bed where I had dreamed of leaving for Tokyo, now fighting to stay. But the real climax came a week later. I was in the kitchen making tea when the doorbell rang. It was a courier. He handed me a large envelope addressed to the estate of Thomas Miller. I opened it. Inside was a letter from a life insurance company I didn't recognize. "Dear Mrs. Miller, regarding the policy taken out on your life by Mr. Richard Vane." My blood ran cold. He had taken out a $2 million life insurance policy on my mother 3 months ago. The beneficiary, Richard Vane. I read the fine print. The policy had a contestability period of 2 years, but accidental death paid out double indemnity immediately. "Accidents happen," he had told me on the phone. "Just ask Beatrice." I dropped the letter. My hands were shaking so hard I spilled the tea. He wasn't just going to rob her, he was going to kill her. The trip to Portugal wasn't a retirement, it was a one-way ticket. A tragic hiking accident, a slip on a wet cobblestone street, a fall from a balcony. I walked into the living room where my mother was staring blankly at the TV. I sat down next to her and handed her the letter. She read it slowly. Her face went from pale to gray. She didn't cry this time. She just stared at the paper, the reality of her near-death experience sinking in. "He was going to kill me," she whispered. "Yes," I said, "he was." She looked at me, really looked at me for the first time since I arrived. She saw the exhaustion in my eyes, the fear, the fierce determination that had driven me to fly across an ocean and fight a war for her. "You saved my life," she said, her voice trembling. "You didn't just save the house, you saved me." "I always will, Mom," I said. She pulled me into a hug, gripping me so tight it hurt. "I'm so sorry, Isabella, I'm so sorry." 6 months later. The California sun was warm on my face as I sat on the back porch, watching my mother prune the roses. She had replanted them. The succulents and white stones were gone, replaced by the chaotic, colorful English garden my father had loved. Rick, or rather, Richard Vane, was currently residing in a state penitentiary in Arizona, awaiting trial for fraud, identity theft, and attempted murder. The evidence from Beatrice's daughter, combined with the life insurance policy and the burner phone texts, had been enough to deny him bail. The gentleman investor was facing 20 to life. We had managed to recover about half of the money he stole. The rest was gone, spent on his lavish lifestyle and administrative fees for his fake companies. But the house was safe. The mortgage was paid off. My original gift had stood firm. My mother was different now. The naive, trusting woman was gone, replaced by someone sharper, more cautious, but also more authentic. She had started volunteering at a local senior center, teaching financial literacy classes to other widows. She called it her penance. "It's not penance, Mom," I told her one evening over dinner. "It's wisdom. You're turning a scar into a shield." "Maybe," she smiled, a sad but genuine smile. "But I still can't believe I called the security guard on you." "We can laugh about it now," I lied. We couldn't really laugh about it yet. The wound was still healing, but it was scabbing over. I hadn't gone back to Tokyo. I took a leave of absence, which turned into a remote consulting role. I needed to be here, not to hover, but to rebuild. Sarah came over for dinner that night. She brought a bottle of expensive champagne. "To justice," she toasted, raising her glass. "To family," my mother added, clinking her glass against mine. "And to daughters who don't give up." "To the house," I said quietly. Later that night, after Sarah left and Mom went to bed, I walked through the quiet house. I ran my hand along the hallway wall, feeling the texture of the paint. I stopped at the front door, the door that had been slammed in my face. I opened it and stepped out onto the porch. The "Welcome to our happy place" mat was gone. In its place was a simple, sturdy coir mat. I looked up at the moon. I thought about my dad. I wondered if he had been watching the whole time, screaming at me to fight, to not let him win. I pulled my phone out. I had one last loose end to tie up. I opened the email app and composed a message to the bank. Subject: confirmation of title transfer. To whom it may concern. Please find attached the finalized deed transfer documents. As per the agreement with my mother, Constance Miller, the property at address has been placed into the Miller Family Trust, with myself, Isabella Miller, as the sole trustee. My mother retains a life estate, granting her the right to live in the home for the rest of her life, rent-free and protected. However, the ownership is now secured. No one can sell it. No one can borrow against it. No one can take it away from her ever again. Sincerely, Isabella Miller. I hit send. It wasn't about control. It was about safety. My mother had agreed to it willingly. "I don't trust myself right now," she had said. "You keep it safe for both of us." I took a deep breath of the cool night air. The nightmare was over. The predator was in a cage. My mother was safe, and I was home. I went back inside and locked the door. This time, I used my own key, and it turned perfectly.